In business this year, three things to know. First, oil all over. The headline of the year is oil's price collapse. It has put more money in the pockets of consumers, hit energy companies hard, and upended the political environment for many of America's adversaries. Then, GOP takeover, how the Republicans swept Congress in the midterm elections, and how that will impact business and regulatory policy. And we pick three of our favorite people of the day for the year. Big names, no names. What they did to get the honor. Arise Exchange starts now. Merry Christmas. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Welcome to a special edition of Arise Exchange, Exchange Rewind, a look back at 2014. And the stock market, no doubt, is one of the big stories of the year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed above about 1,500 points for the year. Despite some large sell-offs, the index routinely hit record highs. The Dow began the year at around 16,500. And at the moment is over 18,000. Daniel Alpert is the managing partner from Westwood Capital to talk about the year in equities and some emerging markets. Dan, welcome to Arise Exchange. Thank you for stopping by. So, how much did the market surprise you this year when you talk about equities?
I think the disconnect between the bond market and the equity market was a little surprising. After all, I was one of the few people at the end of last year who went on camera and said, bond rates are going to go down. U.S. Treasury rates are going to go down. Everybody a year ago expected them to go up.
Sure.
And in that environment, of course, we saw the market behave as though there was more free lunch coming, more liquidity, and therefore fewer opportunities for alternative investment in bonds. And so a lot of money moved into equities.
Did we get that free lunch, basically?
Well,
more so than you thought?
We did, except for the fact that everybody thought at the time that with the Fed tapering off of purchases, we would end up in the opposite situation. So it's very interesting. Are the markets in a safe place at this level? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the trading since the last real push has been at very, very low volumes, and I'm not quite sure that equity markets are going to be able to
that's true.
sustain
We've
this
been moving higher on low volumes, which is
Right.
usually a case. It's like the person goes into the store and buys things when the store is empty. You
Right.
can't really read too much into how that business is doing.
Right.
And you mentioned the Fed and interest rates. How do you think the Fed is able to keep rates low when it has ended this tapering program, or when it has tapered?
Well, I think the answer is that the Fed really wasn't the reason that rates were low to begin with, and I think that's what was proven this year beyond, in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I'd been claiming that for a while, but the reason is we have a huge global capital glut. There's just too much cash chasing too few high-grade sovereign debt, too little high-grade sovereign debt, and that is creating a problem that is going to continue regardless of whether or not the central banks are buying.
We don't talk much about the bond market on this program, but let's do that right now. Do you think you're going to see a change in attitude with the bond market going forward into 2015?
Well, one would think, given the last couple of quarters of growth in the United States, that the bond market should be trading off and yields should be going higher. But as a practical matter, we're faced with this incredible and unprecedented onslaught of deflation, not just in Europe and Japan, but now in the United States, especially with the drop in oil. We're going to see prices deflate as they did last month, next month, the next month, and who knows from there. In a disinflationary environment, and especially in a deflationary environment, it's hard to imagine that interest rates can rise.
The Fed doesn't use that word, deflation, because
it's a dirty word. The D word.
It is a boogeyman word, right. Definitely. There's very little they can do to combat it, isn't there?
Well, this all gets back to the subject of the book that I wrote, which is called The Age of Oversupply. And I think the proof of the pudding is you go look at China, right? China is a market that's growing still very, very quickly. And you would think that its inflation rate would be quite healthy. Well, China, year over year, has fallen to 1.6%. I mean, that's below the Fed's target for the United States in a far lower growing economy. So it's very, very hard to imagine a world in which you have the fastest growing economy with price growth so low that you're going to be able to see price growth in the developed markets.
I want to talk about emerging markets for a moment. This was a very challenging year for many of the emerging markets, especially in sort of those BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. What do you see, what was the impact that emerging markets? Why did they struggle so much?
Well, put aside India. India has a very good story right now with Modi having become prime minister and is now in a position, hopefully, to introduce the market liberalization that India so badly needs. Now, of course, not all of that is really great news for the United States or for the other developed markets, because if you unleash India the way China has been unleashed in terms of production, that's going to put a lot of competitive pressure on the developed world. But as a play in and of itself, I think India is very, very attractive. I think that, of course, Modi could slip up. A lot of it is, in fact, politics, not economics. But we will find out what happens next year. But certainly India had a great run. China had a run up at the end of the year, but I think one of the problems is that people don't recognize what's really going on there. They are in the process of liberalizing their onshore markets as opposed to offshore trading of stock in Hong Kong and what have you. And so you're now seeing an enormous amount of price escalation in anticipation of the fact that foreigners are going to be able to freely trade in those markets. So the China situation obviously was pretty bad for most of the year. Last 2 months, it went up. Everything else, pretty much everything else, when you consider Mexico and Russia, et cetera, it's all oil affected.
Well, I was about to say, commodities-based emerging markets, Brazil,
they're
Russia,
done. They're history, right? I mean, for now, they're history. I mean, look, as long as the Saudis continue to pump at the rate they are, as long as the U.S. continues to develop its domestic oil and gas industry at the rate we are, it's very difficult to imagine a situation where the secondary suppliers of energy are going to do very well. And of course, I'm lumping Russia in that category, which is a hell of a nerve, because it's hardly a secondary supplier. But you look at the evisceration to the Russian economy caused by the drop in oil, it's pretty dramatic.
Dan Alpert, thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Good to be here.
And coming up, we are going to talk about oil as Rise Exchange Rewind continues. Stay with us.
Unrest continues in Ferguson, Missouri. Exactly what happened to Michael Brown Jr.'s memorial. The NFL fallout continues. Why does this video change the game? President Barack Obama met with congressional leaders today.
He does not need congressional approval to carry out the strikes.
The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force.
Do I want to have a draft? No, because I don't want to have war.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Informative. Wall Street, more treats than tricks for Investors Friday as the markets closed out the week at record highs. Compelling. China is the world's largest economy. Of course, the numbers are a little bit milked. If you actually believed that drinking Red Bull would give you wings, you're about to collect $10.
Tim Cook coming out as gay, being in the forefront, it shows that there's diversity in leadership.
All business. It was the best day for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ all year. Entertaining money daily.
We're in a slow growth but not a no growth economy.
Rise Exchange. Welcome back to Exchange Rewind, where we're looking back at 2014. Oil prices went on a heck of a ride this year. Oil opened the year around $93 a barrel. It hit nearly $105 over the summer, and then, well, the wheels came off. It has been on a steady slide since, closing as low as $55. Sean Brodrick is an analyst with InvestmentU.com and the Oxford Club, and he joins us now by phone. Sean, thank you for joining us here on Arise Exchange.
Thank you very much for having me.
Boy, did this slide in oil just catch everyone off by surprise? Anyone predict this?
Well, certainly at the very start of the year, no. But as things went on, we saw more and more production coming from North America. We saw Iraq ramping up its production. We saw Libya coming back online. Then people started to, say, you know what? We're really going to have a surplus of oil. Then we had to change our bets in the market.
So the question is this a supply problem or is this a world economy problem? Because that's where really the argument is.
Right. That's an argument that I'm having with a lot of people. Some people think that the wheels are coming off the global economy. I strongly disagree. This is a case where we have new tech that has changed the game in how much oil is supplied, and so we are seeing surging supply in North America, in Africa, in even the Middle East. We're seeing more supply come on.
Yeah,
so that's really changing the game.
You mentioned new tech, and I guess we're talking about fracking to some extent. That is clearly a game changer, right? It has come on in huge numbers and really driven the price down.
Yes, That, but also people really don't understand the whole fracking technology improves all the time. It becomes cheaper and cheaper to frack. Plus, there's new technology coming on, like, say, nanotechnology. That, again, will make things cheaper. So we're going to have this play out over the course of the next year. My forecast is we'll see lower oil prices through at least the middle of the year. Around the middle of the year, I expect I'll have to reassess. We are starting to see new projects canceled. Nobody's canceling existing production. And even if new projects do not come on, U.S. oil production is expected to rise through next year.
Yeah, is there, that's a good question, because some people have said that with the substantial drop in oil, now the U.S. can't support the drilling that it's doing here. Do you buy that?
In certain places, yes. In fact, we are seeing projects canceled up in Alaska. We are seeing projects canceled in, for example, the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale. Projects are also canceled there. However, I've been reading some stuff because one of the projects I thought would be canceled would be up in, say, the oil sands up in Canada. But I've been reading about the lifting costs they have there, and they're a lot cheaper than you might think. So I think everyone's playing this game of chicken, waiting for the other guy really to, blink first. People expect at, some point, Saudi Arabia will have to cut. They have lower costs than anybody. They aren't going to cut. They're going to wait for us to cut.
Yeah, they said today they don't mind if oil goes down to $20 a barrel, and that's the game of chicken, because it's not so much which country may cut production first, but here in the U.S. it really comes down to which company might cut, correct?
Right. That is a very good point, because it is all very different depending on what oil field you're in. Some have much higher costs. So what you should concentrate on are those companies that have A, low debt, it's very important, B, a cash flow, and C, low lifting costs. Those companies are really being beaten down right now. They're all being thrown in the trash, right? But there are some real bargains there that longer term should do very well. Yeah,
and for the overall U.S. economy, how much did the low oil prices sort of factor into that pop we saw in the GDP?
I think that really factored a lot. People do not want to give people do not want to give the current administration any credit, but they really stood out of the way and let things happen in the whole oil industry. And we saw exports of oil fuel and stuff like that zoom. We've seen industries around the U.S. that use oil as an input really take off. We have seen the consumer have much more money in their pockets. This is a thing that low oil is really helping. And so, again, at least through the first half of next year, things could be pretty good.
Okay, Sean Brodrick, an analyst with InvestmentU.com. Have a good new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The winds of political change swept through Washington this fall when Republicans took control of Congress. Come the new year, the GOP will have large majorities in both the Senate and the House, and they vow to roll back regulations they say are job killers. So how will the president respond? John Burns is Arise News legal correspondent, joins us once again from Washington, D.C. Good to see you 2 days in a row.
Great to see you too, Andrew.
Always welcome on the program. So
all right.
in your thoughts, how much did you think the economic issues played a role here in the Republicans winning Congress? Or is it simply a case where the Democrats kind of, worn out their welcome?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think economic dissatisfaction definitely played a role in the Republicans winning. In November, you look at some Democrats in the South and some Democrats in some of the West states, some Midwest states. I mean, they were really anxious and uncertain about about the economic recovery. And so that definitely played a role and possibly compelled them to vote differently.
So, legal issues and regulatory issues really obviously are intertwined. So it's kind of appropriate to ask you the question about whether you think the regulatory environment in 2014 is going to start to swing, or was it balanced appropriately?
I think the regulatory environment in 2014 just intensified even more based upon you look at what happened before in the previous years in response to some of the foul play in the financial sector markets. I think that just continued to intensify, and you saw more regulation in terms of trying to curb abuse and trying to add more transparency. So I think that's going to continue to grow well into 2015.
So it's really interesting to me. Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, made an absolutely impassioned speech on the Senate floor after the election, where she said the regulations have not gone far enough when it comes to things like Dodd-Frank, which, the financial industry absolutely hates. Small businesses criticize it for really hurting lending. Do you think the momentum, despite the Republicans winning, may be on the progressive side on some of these issues?
It's hard to tell at this juncture. I think if you listen and talk to some of these CEOs, they're saying they're spending more time talking to political and regulatory and government officials than they ever had in the past. And I think even for like the highly regulated industries, they're having to change their whole business models to conform to some of these regulations. So based upon the global pace of what I've seen of regulatory reform, it's only going to accelerate. So I don't think it's going to ultimately change too drastically.
I'll tell you where the jobs are. They're in the compliance departments of many of these companies.
Absolutely. They're spending and losing so much money trying to comply and trying to conform their internal policies to meet the threshold requirements of these regulations.
What do you talk to us a little bit about the business initiatives from the president this past year?
I think the President Obama, I think he was really trying to really target small business growth. I think he did some initiatives in terms of providing more lending capabilities to small businesses and also some more capabilities for them to hire and grow their workforce a lot quicker, too. And then they also actually did some work and initiatives with respect to minority-owned businesses as well.
And when you look at the Republicans, they're going to make the case that the regulatory environment is killing small businesses. What kind of sort of wind will they have at their backs going into the next year? And will this possibly let the president, move forward on some of the issues that he hasn't been able to move forward with Democrats?
I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because you're going into an election year in 2016, so no party is going to step out of turn because you have to remember our electorate is really based upon what happened most recently. So they're going to judge any type of bad act, and they're going to ultimately punish the party who committed that bad act. So I think both the Democrats and Republicans are going to move forward very cautiously.
Okay, John Burns, Arise News legal correspondent from Washington, D.C. Have a good New Year.
Thank you, Andrew. You too.
Ahead, 3 of our favorite people of the year. You're watching Arise Exchange Rewind. Stay with us.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola.
This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Exchange Rewind. There are so many people who did so many bad things this year that it was tough for us to name our top 3 favorite people of the day for the year. But these are our choices. He's Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, allegedly caught on camera smoking crack You can call him the Canadian version of Marion Barry, the Washington, D.C. mayor who was also caught smoking crack on camera back in 1990. Toronto's police chief today says they have recovered video from the computer hard drive that belonged to Ford's former friend, driver, and apparently fellow crackhead. The police chief said the video is, quote, consistent with earlier reports of the mayor's crack use, but that it was insufficient to press charges against Ford. When reporters asked the mayor this morning about the video, he yelled at them to get off his lawn. Ford has vowed to stay in office, and, if it's any consolation, Marion Barry was re-elected mayor after his crack conviction. So, for proving that Toronto is about more than maple leaves, Mayor Rob Ford is our favorite person of the day. Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, we have a story of why you may not want to win the Employee of the Month award at your business, especially if you work at a Florida Walmart. When Willie Mitchell heard that his colleague won the Employee of the Month award at a Deerfield, Florida Walmart, he didn't take it too well, thinking that maybe he should have won it. So he did what any reasonable sore loser might do. He shot up the woman's car. Mitchell allegedly drove up to the employee's car, rolled down his window, and reportedly opened fire. The car was empty at the time. No one was hurt. Broward County Police say when the award was announced, Mitchell apparently began arguing with the victim and allegedly yelled, quote, "I'm going to show you." And so he did. The award doesn't actually carry any prize, just a nice announcement that you won it. The prize for shooting up your coworker's car, on the other hand, possibly years in jail. So here's a tip for all employees. Firing shots at your coworker's car probably disqualifies you from winning the Employee of the Month award. And so Willie Mitchell may not be Employee of the Month, but he is our favorite person of the day. Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Now, we've all made the embarrassing mistake of pocket or butt dialing someone, but mother and son criminal masterminds from Florida managed to butt dial their way right to jail. 55-year-old Donna Nope and her 32-year-old son Jason were allegedly going over plans to make crystal meth when one of them butt dialed 911. Oops. The dispatcher at the precinct listened to the three allegedly go over how to make and sell meth for nearly half an hour. Walter White, these two are certainly not. Police traced the call to the backyard where the plans were being hatched. When the cops arrived, surprise, they discovered a working meth lab. Well, the rocket scientists of mom and her son and a third partner were holed away, along with all the torches and tubes they allegedly used to make the meth. The three face a variety of drug charges and probably a high cell phone bill, 30 minutes. So for talking about their plans to make illegal drugs without even putting the lock on their phone, mother and son, meth makers Donna and Jason Nope, are our favorite people of the day. And on New Year's Eve, we will name our favorite person of the year, and you could help us pick that person. Go to our Facebook page to vote. Coming up, Exchange Rewind. We'll be right back. You're watching Arise News. Stay with us.
The search continues for the more than 200 abducted schoolgirls.
Unquestionably, this is a Nigerian problem.
President Barack Obama stopped short of visiting the border. Why can't Washington get anything done when it comes to immigration reform?
But you got to come up with a solution to it, and no one has a real solution.
Does this further terrorize people, make them more afraid, or is this making people angry? Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Mainstream news has covered all of the issues of the world, which are like this, through a very narrow lens. And at Arise News, we do things different. We cover every culture, every angle. Our mission is to go to these places, to these communities, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Europe, Asia, the United States, the Caribbean. And we're going to find these stories, and we're going to tell them to our audience. Stories that they probably never heard of before, and stories that they'll find interesting and engaging.
Global. It's Monday, so it must be time for a new round of sanctions against Russia.
Nigeria is open for business, and you are getting a handle
on this situation. Compelling. Time for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. Could she have been separated at birth from, say, Grimace? All business.
Money's coming out of these countries, and that flow is part of what's driving the equity markets.
Entertaining money daily.
It's about reimagining.
Arise Exchange. A lot of sports news was off the field this year, from the NFL domestic violence scandal to the NBA's handling of Donald Sterling to FIFA's ongoing charges of corruption. Professional sports took it on the chin. Andrew Rosario, Arise News sports correspondent, helps us run down what was a very big year in sports, but not because of what was going on the court or on the field or even on the ice. You know,
unfortunately,
let's talk about the NFL here, because this was really the year. I mean, the NFL had been doing a barely acceptable job in managing the concussion problem.
Correct.
And then we got the Ray Rice situation, where he clearly assaulted his soon-to-be wife. And basically the entire NFL facade collapsed around that. You know, review for us where you think the NFL is today in sort of repairing its image.
They're having a hard time, and basically because after the Ray Rice incident, the horrible tape that came out, and we saw what happened, then the commissioner just suspended him for 2 games, and then the Ravens cutting him, and then the other video coming out, and they suspended him for the rest of the year. But the decision was overturned by an arbitrator a judge ruled that Ray Rice was forthcoming to the commissioner. And so she felt that it was almost like double jeopardy, and he shouldn't have been suspended for the whole year. Now, he was reinstated, but he was not picked up by another team.
Do you think he's going to find another team? I mean, Michael Vick found another team. I mean, you can't compare the two necessarily, but there seems to be a lot of redemption and second chances in this league.
I think he will find another team. I mean, because prior to that, he basically had a clean record across the board. He wasn't a problem player. And at one point, he was at the height of running backs in the league. So I believe that next year, he'll get another chance.
Now, the question is, will the NFL continue to face these embarrassing situations coming up? I mean, is there a lot of here under sort of the water that we're not seeing right now?
You know what? That's time will tell. We had one other player from San Francisco a couple of weeks ago who was suspended by the team for allegedly having domestic issues. So now the problem is...
And by the way, other leagues are doing that too. The NHL suspended, I'm not sure exactly who recently, but a domestic violence issue as well.
Exactly. And now it's up to the commissioner and him forming this group that will oversee situations like that. So at one point, he was the judge, jury, and executioner, but after he took a hit from the way he handled the situation, he's bringing in a group of people. That announcement will be made before the Super Bowl and determine what actions will be taken if a player
With the NFL, the only thing that counts, I hate to say it, is the number of dollars going into the owner's pockets.
That is correct.
Any idea if they got hit at all in that category this year?
I read recently that it doesn't appear that they've taken a big hit, especially with Super Bowl coming up and the price of the ads. You know how expensive those ads can be. Right now, they're saying that they're on par to last year's Super Bowl.
And ratings seem to be pretty good as well.
Correct.
Donald Sterling in the NBA. Let's compare the NFL to the NBA and basically how the NBA handled a situation where Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers, made a series of racist comments. That execution came pretty swift.
It did. It came pretty swift, and there was no question about it. I was at that press conference when the announcement was made, and I think initially it shocked a lot of people that he was banned for life and that he was going to be asked to sell the team. But then when we thought about it, we said that was the only choice that he could have made.
Yeah, and the NBA basically be able to move on beyond that pretty quickly, right?
Exactly, yeah. They did finalize the sale of the team. But, you know, the funny thing is that he purchased that team for anywhere between $16 and $20 million.
Yeah, he made a lot of money on it.
He ended up selling it for $2 billion.
Right. So, you know, but for him, it was clearly his life has, you know, at the end of his life, it's a huge embarrassment.
Exactly.
Never going to be able to recover from that. We have about a minute left.
Okay.
We can't not go without talking about FIFA. The head of the Ethics Commission for FIFA quit, saying there is no Ethics Commission because there's no ethics here at this organization. How badly, if at all, did this hurt the game?
You know what? I don't think it's hurt it from that standpoint. But what has hurt is that the president, Sepp Blatter, has really took a hit. But, you know, FIFA is such a big and such a successful organization that they're almost like...
Money again.
Money again. You know, they're almost like laughing at everyone. Because if you look at the popularity of this past year's World Cup, it was through the roof. But you know, we have other World Cups coming up. The one that in question, 2022 in Qatar, that's the one that's really taking a big hit.
And we'll find out what happens there. Andrew Rosario, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy holidays.
Well, that's it for Arise Exchange Rewind. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Merry Christmas. We'll see you next week.